South End in Toledo. They had an older brother and an older sister, not very much older. When Josh and John were born, Laura and Jake were 3 and 2. About a year, a little more than a year after they were born, I noticed they weren't doing much, they didn't have very much language skills. So I would question the doctor, and everybody told me I was crazy, that they're twins and twins frequently do this, they'll have their own language. But because I was going with my gut feeling, I had them both tested. And Lucas County MRDD, I think at the time, was doing the birth to 3-year-olds. And so they came out and tested them, and yes, they did have a significant language delay. Some gross motor, but not very bad with the gross motor. They told me that yes, indeed, they did have some language delays, and that they would like to start them in some programming to help either catch their language up, because at that point they weren't sure whether it was just the fact that they were twins, and this is a common problem in twins, or whether there was a deeper seated problem. We had a tutor that would come out to the house, and she did language activities with the boys, and she taught my husband and I some activities that we would do when she wasn't there. It went very well. They learned a few words, but continued to be pretty language delayed. Like I said, they had some gross motor delays where things like riding bikes, running, skipping, jumping, they were enough delayed that I thought that there was a problem, but somebody else might not know there was a problem. When we were getting ready to go to preschool, when they turned 3, they did retested them. At that point, they diagnosed them as being developmentally delayed with significant language delays. I, of course, was upset, but we had some twins at our church that had had some strokes and those kinds of things as infants, and so I had done some work with them, and so I was able to look at my guys and say, well, you know, we can deal with this. This isn't too bad. As we kind of worked our way through the school system, I found that school teachers and administrators like to keep secret important things that would help me make decisions for my boys' education. And so at that point, I went back to school and got my degree in elementary ed, special ed combined, so that I could make informed decisions. I think some of my early childhood experiences probably helped me more than anything. I went to one of the few junior highs in the Toledo area that had students with disabilities. They were isolated, but once a year they would do a program. And we would all go and watch their program. And I always felt bad because people tended to make fun of them, and it wasn't a positive thing that I thought it should be. And so I always thought in the back of my mind, that's something I'm never going to do. And then I got in this situation with my guys, and it's actually turned out very positive. As I talked to other parents and educators, I found that there were things that I hadn't been told that I felt I should have been told. And I thought if I went back to school and educated myself, then I would be able to make those decisions. I would know what to look for and how to make decisions for the boys. And when I say I was a teacher shopper, what I would do is I would go visit the classroom before they were scheduled to go into that classroom. So when they were scheduled to start kindergarten, I knew that they would have that same teacher unless we moved for the next 3 to 4 years. And so I wanted to make sure the teacher was a good fit with the boys and philosophically understood where I was coming from. Josh and John qualified actually for 2 areas, developmentally delayed or multi-handicap. And I went with the multi-handicap classroom for them in those early years because the teacher was very good at including the kids in programming, including the kids in the gym and the music. I believe that the impact that it had on their lives is that I was able to take a look at things more clearly. I always had a philosophy that if, when they were adults, if they acted like everybody else, if they could go to a party and be goofy and talk to people, that they would be accepted. Nobody would ask them if they could do math or if they could read. And so for me, the socialization was the most important thing, and so that was one of the things that I worked very hard on. We started in the Toledo Public Schools. That they had Debbie, their teacher, for 4 years. And then at that point, we again had to decide, do we want them to be developmentally handicapped or multi-handicapped? So again, I visited classrooms, and I found where I thought would be a good fit, which actually turned out to be a school that was in our neighborhood. So it was a neighborhood school. They went to school with the kids that lived around us. I think that that was really good because what happened is we had a basketball court, and the boys would be out there trying their best to shoot some baskets, and some neighbor kids would come over and kind of play with them. And my thought on that was always that if you started kids young working and playing with other kids with disabilities, pretty soon they would, instead of looking at the differences, they would look at the likenesses. And my other thought was that when those young kids that went to school with them grew up to become CEOs and managers of companies, that if they got somebody with a disability that came in looking for a job, that they might think back about Josh and John and remember how that worked. We moved out of the Toledo area. We moved out to Curtis. We call it a farm. The farmers tell us it isn't a farm because it's only 6 acres, not 10. And we moved out there because we could have some space. They could have horses. The boys like to fish, so we live right next to a marina.
Fishing and people I have not seen before. Yeah, they are what natural out there.
They went to Fassett Junior High and then Clay High School, always in developmentally disabled classrooms. But again, I was always someone who pushed for them to be in other activities that weren't just with kids with disabilities. They really didn't have much of a gross motor problem once they started to get involved in some things. They could ride bikes and run and do just about any of those kinds of things. Josh played freshman football at Clay, and they did the roller hockey.
Roller hockey? For IMCA?
They ran for cross country and track and field with a team here in Toledo called Toledo Alive. I think it was important to them because they felt like everybody else. You know, they were participating in a sport with everybody else, not just in a sport with other kids with disabilities. When they were still in high school, we got involved with the county board's personal futures planning, and in that group there were people from the board that were there, and we just kind of planned for their future. What did we want to see happen? What kinds of things were we looking for? And then what they did is they tried to make some of those things happen. They found a driving course that just works with people with disabilities, and so they were able to take their driver's test, and they both drive. They've done a lot of different jobs through high school. They painted. Josh worked for a long time at one of the local hospitals, most of his high school career. They worked at the zoo for a while, but that was all in high school. And then after they graduated from high school, we worked with BVR to find them a job. They tried a few things, sometimes successfully, sometimes not successfully. Currently, Josh is working at Tam O'Shanter. He only works part-time with no benefits, but he likes the job, he enjoys it, does janitorial, and then he does some ice skating. He gets to do some ice skating on his lunch and some of those kinds of things, so he likes that. And Jon is currently working at the Goodwill warehouse, and he doesn't drive the truck, he rides around, he does some sorting, and then he rides around picking up furniture and those kinds of things because they're both extremely strong.
On the bail machine, we bail clothes, and Goodwill gets the money for those bail clothes like I ride in a semi-truck.
They currently live at home with us, and they're brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews. Josh and Jon are 3 and 4 in our family group. They have my oldest daughter, Laura, Jacob, and then the baby is Phyllis. All of the kids help each other. They recognize that the guys have a problem, but they treat them like they treat everybody else. They fight and they scream and holler and yell and all of those crazy kind of family things that everybody else has always done. But I believe that they have the skills currently to live on their own. Probably will need some assistance with the financial piece of it. They don't handle money very well. They're real good at spending it. And I think that they want to move out on their own at some point also.
Yes, I would.
Anywhere at home.
We have a long driveway out at our property in Curtis. And so then we bought equipment at home. We bought nets for them, and they would play there. And to this day still play roller hockey in our driveway. They just kind of moved from that into the Toledo Storm, which they loved. So then came the Walleye. They have season tickets. They receive a budget from the board. We got a wonderful SAS named Kelly, and she was able to take a look at the boys, at what our hopes and dreams were for them, and turn some of those dreams into reality by getting her bosses to rethink some things. And we've been very happy with things ever since. They get passes to Cedar Point. They go to Cedar Point. They spend a lot of time at Cedar Point. They both have laptop computers. The board got them a GPS unit. So we're able to set the GPS. That's how they travel. They primarily travel alone or with some of their friends. We'll set the GPS, and off they go. Sometimes it's a little scary, but I let them go, and they do quite fine without me. They've been to Kalamazoo. They've been to Huntington, West Virginia, I think. Reading.
Wheeling.
Wheeling, West Virginia. Reading, Pennsylvania.
Johnstown.
Oh, Johnstown, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we followed a hockey team around. Behind the visitor goalie.
All right, you suck.
Jon has a camper pop-up, and they go to Cedar Point. They camp. They have a campground. They don't camp at the Cedar Point campground. They have another campground that they like to camp at that's close to Cedar Point. And the people there just love them and think it's great that they come and feed them breakfast. A group of friends that they met, I believe, through a work experience they had at Walgreens Warehouse when Walgreens first opened. And this group has continued to meet almost every Friday night out at the sports center, where they bowl and they have a good time and they party and they get home at 3 in the morning. Most of them are other people that have some form of disability. Some of them do, some of them don't. But it's kind of a fun mixed group.
Me and John did that. Then that's just, yeah. You hang around with.
They share the same passion I do. Like hockey and bowling.
The thing that I think is really neat about it is it's a group they formed. They didn't need any parent or supervisor stepping in and organizing the group for them. They just kind of organized the group themselves. Once in a while they'll pick up a new person along the way, and because they both drive, they go pick up people, drop people off at home, those kinds of things. I feel extremely confident that they will be okay. One of the most difficult things for me was to let them drive. That was a very hard thing for me. One of them, I think it was Josh, was coming home from work and somebody rear-ended him, and I didn't hear anything about it. So he gets home from work and he tells me he had this accident and hands me the police report, and I said, did they get what they need? And he says, yeah, he gave them everything they needed. And so at that point I said to myself, I guess you really don't, you know, you've trained them well and you don't need to be afraid anymore. And so I sometimes think about those kinds of things, but I let them go.